and welcome back, everybody. It is episode 2 of Blueprints and Bytes. I am joined by my lovely co-host, Ajoy. Ajoy, great to see you again. I'm just reminding everyone, please subscribe to our channel. We have a QR code, very nifty QR code up in the corner there. If you want to just snap a picture on the camera there, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. As always, remember, this content is what you make of it, right? So give us comments, give us ideas on who you'd like to see on the show. Speaking of which, I am incredibly excited that we have our first guest. And Ajoy, I'm going to pass it over to you for an introduction.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon. John and I are very excited to have an amazing guest with us, Kay Sargent. Kay, she is a principal at HOK, a global design, architecture, engineering, and planning firm. Kay, good morning. Would you mind firstly just introducing yourself a little bit more? Tell us what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I think a lot of people ask me that question. What do you actually do? So I am a practicing designer, 39 years, and just heard my back crack when I said that, but I've been around for a little while, seasoned, I will say. And I am the director of workplace thought leadership at HOK, which means that I work with a lot of our big clients that have projects all around the world, millions of square feet of real estate. And when you're in that situation, you don't like to do a lot of guessing. You kind of want to know what's happening. So we really do a lot of future casting. We think about what's coming, what's impacting us, not just about the workplace, but all the other elements as well. And then we bring that and share that with our clients, kind of those best practices. So people ask where I live. I have a house in Washington that I visit occasionally, but I'm usually in an airport someplace.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. So, you talk about the future. Let me first start with kind of industry as a whole. I know you travel a lot, you've seen a lot of things around the world, but what do you see as some industry challenges, but also what's emerging, what's coming for the next few years? What do you see?
How long do we have to talk about the industry challenges, right? Because I could go on forever about that. Look, I mean, we've gone through a massive shift. And I think for a lot of us, COVID really was fuel on the fire. Like, this started way before. A lot of companies had way too much square footage before the pandemic. And quite frankly, a lot of companies aren't leveraging technology nearly as much as they need to be. I think they're behind in that regard. I mean, in all honesty, the auto industry is kicking our butt. If you think about this, right, you can be in your house, you can start your car, you can get it all nice and warm, you can walk down, you don't have to take your hands out of your pocket. The door will automatically open because you've got a fob in your pocket. And when you get into that car, it knows who you are, not the other driver, but you. And everything is automatically adjusted to you, whether it's your mirrors or your seat or your music or the light or the temperature. And your phone can even sync with your dashboard. Then you drive for about a half an hour, you get to the office, and there you're crawling around on the floor trying to find an outlet, right? Like, we are so far behind in the workplace. We have not leveraged technology. So now that AI has exploded onto the scene, we've been talking about this for years, but now all of a sudden it's become like a very sharp reality. Everybody's scrambling to catch up. So everybody's trying to figure out how do we work now after COVID? Everybody's trying to figure out how do we incorporate technology? Everybody's trying to figure out how do we get the best out of people? And I think in many cases, there's a common theme here where we're missing the bigger picture and we're focusing on the little elements right in front of us, but we're not looking up at the horizon.
That's super interesting, Kay, and thank you for that. I love the analogy of the car, right? Because you don't walk into I'd love to be able, just my own home, be able to walk in and the lights are on that I like,
Yeah.
right? And the temperature is set to the way I want it to be set, and someone's fed the dogs, right? That would be absolutely amazing to me. So
And you can
you
do
said
all that today, by the way. You could do that.
yes, exactly. So with technology being available but not being implemented, where do you think that disconnect is? Is it an issue? Look, again, we only have 73 hours for this podcast, right? So we could probably get into it a little bit
No.
here.
Why?
Where is that disconnect?
Okay, so here's I think that the reason why it isn't being leveraged as much as possible. First of all, I heard a great thought leader, futurist, say one time that anything that when you're born anything that exists, you don't consider a technology, right? So technology is just not electronic technology. It's everything. It's the carpet. It's the fabric. It's everything. It's all around us. But today we tend to think of it only as electronics. So anything that was there when you're born, you don't think of it as technology. Anything that is created between the ages of 0 and maybe 35, maybe 40, if I'm going to be generous, is like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is going to change my life. You get to a point in your life, like around 40-ish maybe, where you're just like, oh my God, another thing that I have to learn and change everything. Like, are you kidding me? Right. So part of it is just change fatigue. I think the other thing that's happening is technology is evolving so rapidly, and it's not clear what the right path is, that a lot of people are very hesitant because they don't want to spend all the money to only get it wrong and or then to have it become obsolete. So people are hesitant to jump in unless they almost absolutely have to. I mean, you've got a lot of people that are early adapters and are going to jump in all the time, but you've got a whole lot of people that are laggers. And I think a lot of that has to do with our digital fitness. We Not everybody is up to speed on this. I can't tell you how many places I go to, and there's a $50,000 piece of artwork on the wall that was a monitor, but nobody knows how to use it because it's above their level of digital fitness, right? It's too advanced. And so part of the problem is that people will come in and they sell you the state of the art stuff when the employees don't necessarily need that and don't even really understand it. So I think there's a variety of reasons why, but whatever the reasons why, we kind of got to get over those, I think, and we got to get on the boat.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm thinking about, you travel a lot. You're talking about why there's a disparity internationally, culturally. What do you see?
There's a huge difference, right? So some of it has to do with privacy, and in certain markets, it's like, oh, I don't want people staring at me and looking at me. In other countries, like in Asia, that ship sailed, 10 years ago. I mean, no, like, they see everything. There aren't as many issues with that. I think in some cases it might be a little bit of generational. In other cases, it might be some of the infrastructure challenges. So there are differences around the world that we're seeing as far as the adoption. Um,
And talk a little bit about, I think of sustainability when you talk of technology changing, right? So the introduction of, for example, prefabrication and sustainability, right? Some of these there are buildings out there that are being made. I've seen an article, a building in China that's being made completely prefabricated.
right.
Talk a little bit. How is that changing, the world of design?
So early on in the pandemic, there was a hospital in China that was put up like in record time because of prefabrication. And, we have the ability to do that. I think a lot of it has to do with how utilitarian you want these buildings to be. And then there's a big question about life cycle and sustainability and just speed. So, in certain markets like China or in India, where you are building, or even in the Middle East, where you are building entire cities from scratch, you have a lot of fortitude to incorporate some of that technology. In other parts of the world, it's a little bit more of a challenge. Okay? In other parts of the world, we're more focused on the quality of what is being produced, and there are regulations, and there are guidelines, and there are targets as far as carbon neutrality, et cetera, that are preventing some of those things. Not all of it, but some of that. And some of it is just a mindset, right? Like one of the things that really truly holds us back, any great innovation, is, yeah, but that's not the way we've always done it. We do it this way, right? And so the more mature a market is, probably the bigger the ship is, and the more stuck in the certain way of doing things that they are, and the less adaptable they might actually be to some of these new ways, just because they've always done it that way. So what is the incentive of doing it someplace different? And it takes a while to get over that.
That statement is always interesting to me, right? We've always done it this way, and this is the way we're going to do it, by goodness, because it works, right? But then you look at the work, I mean, your firm is involved, right? You look at ATL Studio, right? You look at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta,
Yeah.
the Apple Store in San Francisco, for example, which are just, I mean, the Apple Store, for example, it's a living environment in which you've just managed to put a building around, which looks completely natural, even though it's not in its natural habitat, right? And you look at the stuff from Mercedes-Benz Stadium,
Yeah.
if you're in there for an event, whether it's a game or a concert or a corporate event, it just, everything is where you need it as you need it, right? So one of the things that I'm interested in though is yes, that's the way we've always done it. Yet those people still marvel at the examples that I just gave you, like, oh, it would be cool if we could do this, whatever. How do you think AI, because I'm the nerd, right? How do you think AI is actually going to be, or will AI be that bridge between this is the way we've always done it to, oh my goodness, that's cool. We could probably do that one day.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting conversations around AI. And actually, somebody recently said, "Oh, this is going to put all the young people out of business." I'm like, I don't know about the young people. It might be that they're going to be the ones that are going to adopt it. It might be the older generation that's the one that gets kicked to the curb. Look, I I think that AI is going to help us in a lot of ways. If it can help generate more information that we can analyze more quickly to get to better solutions faster and ideate and solve problems, then that's a win for everybody. Because you think about the number of calculations we do when we're doing a bridge, or you think about Mercedes-Benz Stadium, or you think about like LaGuardia Airport and the bridges, et cetera. We've created tools that have helped us run information and analysis much more quickly so that we can literally in a week come up with a structural engineering solution or a sustainability approach that is far more flushed out, where before, if we had to do that manually, it might have taken months and we may never have gotten to that point. We may not have even toyed with that. On the other hand, it can be misused, right? So if it's, we kind of sometimes call it the garanimals or the underoos of the design world. If everybody thinks they can do it, I can send a 6-year-old into a grocery store to pick out a 9-piece suit, but I'm willing to bet it's not going to match perfectly. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you're going to do a good job of it, right? And so the problem in putting these tools in the hands of people that don't really understand them is they can make a lot of choices that are okay, but aren't really well thought out or fleshed, and they're actually kind of crappy results. And I think, when we talked about the cultural thing too, if all you care about is utilitarian, getting it done fast and easy and cheap, that's very different than getting something that is more bespoke or that is more tailored or is more correct. And I think we're living in a time where the middle is disappearing. Years ago, you kind of wanted that sweet spot in the middle. We would go to department stores. Now, my kids go to thrift stores or they want designer, right? And it's the same thing today. Clients either want something quick, easy, and fast that's good is good enough, right? It doesn't have to be perfect, right? And we need to acknowledge that there's a sector of the market that wants that. But then there's also people that want very, very bespoke solutions that are more tailored to the individuals and are human-centric and are going to be more icons for the ages.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think one of the things that also I find a lot of similarities, Kay, in adoption of AI, in exactly what you said, right? Look at AI as being the anti-middle, if you would. And a lot of what we see is, okay, if we use AI, does AI become the new voice of the community? Does AI become that new voice of all sides, including the middle? And do we trust it? And I think in there lays a lot of what we have as conversations. Ajoy and I, in a lot of the industry conversations we have, is around trust. Trusting the AI. It goes a little bit into like, we've always done it this way. It goes into a little bit of like, all right, the middle's disappearing, but is AI the big savior that's coming on? Because that's the only thing people are talking about these days.
Well, there really is. We really dug into this about 5 or 6 years ago, and we presented at a conference, and there was a whole room full of people, and there was just one moment where everybody just went silent, because there is a dark side of this. First of all, MIT created something called Norman, which is artificial intelligence, and they fed Norman a bunch of information from Reddit, and they fed a person the same information, and after several hours, The person was like, oh, some of that stuff was really crazy. Ha ha ha. That was funny. Norman was like, the world is ending. This is crazy. We need to do something about, like, it took a very literal, dark view. And we as humans have a sunny disposition, and we do things that aren't necessarily always logical, but they're the correct thing to do from a moral standpoint. Go back and look at Star Trek. Like, Data could never figure out why the captain would ever put himself at risk for a crew member when he was clearly the captain. But that's, I think, one of the differences between us and artificial intelligence. And the other thing is, it's not just about, do I trust artificial intelligence? It's, do I trust who it's in the hands of? I mean, we don't like to think about this, but there are entire companies, entire parts of the world where there are organizations that people go to work every day to scam other people and to use it in a nefarious way. And so there really is a huge concern about this. And I think when you ask the experts and you listen to what they said, there was a group of individuals that are really excited about this. And then there are a group of people like Bill Gates, Stephen Hawkins, Elon Musk that are like, you better watch out what you're doing. And I could never figure out what the difference was. And then it kind of came to us that everybody that's really optimistic about this is looking 5-10 years out. Those guys are looking 40, 50 years out. And you can't put this genie out of the bottle. I really think we're at a point now, it's kind of like the Manhattan Project, where we know what we're using could go really, really badly, but we can't stop because somebody else might get it first. And so I think we have to be really smart about how we leverage this. And in the right hands, I think it can be an amazing tool. We look at artificial intelligence as the balance between man and machine, right? So the machine is really good at running in analytics, giving us information. And then we're really good at saying, okay, what do we do with that? And how do I apply that, et cetera? But Ajoy, you and I had kind of an interesting conversation the other day about the social dynamics of this.
Yep.
And, I think I'm just going to dive into that for a second.
Yes, please.
I think when it comes to technology, we historically have done a pretty good job of predicting what will happen. I mean, Dick Tracy had a watch that he talked to 50 years ago, right? You look at Star Trek or the Jetsons, okay? They predicted a lot of the things that we have today. What they totally missed was the social element. If you think about Star Trek or the Jetsons and how women were portrayed in those and family roles and just, how things were done, they didn't really dive into those social dynamics. They didn't get that right. Okay? And that tends to be where we flaw. And I think we're at a really, really interesting point as we go forward. So I want to take you back, I don't know how many years, maybe 100 almost. We're at a Henry Ford moment once again. Henry Ford was one of the first people to really use the assembly line. And he realized that could massively ramp up his production. AI could massively ramp up our production. And he had a choice. What do I do with that? Do I give it back to the people and make their lives better? Or do I just increase my corporate profits? And we are at that similar point. And what Henry Ford decided was to go to a 5-day work week and to have some gains in productivity, but to leverage a part of that for the betterment of mankind and society and everything else. If we are at a point now where artificial intelligence can truly improve productivity, given the other social dynamics that I don't think most people are talking about today, we're at a critical point. And I'll tell you, those other dynamics are this. I graduated 40 years ago, and I thought I would work for 30 years. I didn't think I'd have to go back and get retrained or upskilled or any of those things. I thought that I would start at the bottom, work my way up. I'd retire in 30 some odd years. There was some, employer-employee relationship and trust. And I had the promise of being better off than my parents. And I have very little debt.
Yep.
This generation is graduating with massive debt. They don't have the promise of being better off than their parents anymore. They are going to finish their careers in jobs that haven't even been created yet. And they're going to have to go back and get upskilled and retrained before they've even paid off the degree that they just got. And a new report came out, and I literally had to read this 3 times. It said that your work expectancy, how long you will work for, is now, for somebody who was born today, who will likely live into their hundreds, 67 years. 67 years, which is unimaginable, untenable. And so this younger generation is not dealing with the dynamics that we had when we entered the workforce. We have to rethink work. And it either has to be shorter weeks, or it has to have embedded sabbaticals, or we have to have embedded training, something. But the social dynamics that we are dealing with today are very, very different. We're not talking enough about that. And we have to think about how can artificial intelligence not just help with production and our lives, but that whole entire work-life balance, and how do we get that right?
And Kay, this is fascinating. I mean, this is it's mind-boggling. Some of these things that you mentioned, the data you've just produced here, but it's scary to some extent, right? Because you think about the future and future of our children, but it is something that we need to pay attention to, I think. Let me ask you, besides AI, how do you see technology impacting the world of architecture in other ways? Or are there any other ways?
Oh, lots of ways, right? So, I mean, when you think about corporate real estate and you think about how many people are running leases or financial analysis, you know, I had one of my kids wanted to go into that, and I said, probably not the best thing for you to go into. Maybe think about going into something else, right? I mean, there are a lot of things in corporate real estate world that can be easily replaced. Design is always one of those things that's on the low end of the spectrum of this is not something that's going to be easily replaced. Okay. I don't know how long it's going to stay there for, but it could be easily enhanced. So we really look at this as something that can help us do our jobs better and help us come to better decisions faster and free us up to do more meaningful things, right? So I don't know anybody in any profession that doesn't think they waste a lot of, I think every single one of us would rather spend our time doing, higher level things, drawing and imagining more versus emailing and, all this other stuff that we have to do. So if it frees us up to come up with better solutions, I think that's great. Regenerative design, the way that we can think about different things, sustainability can be incredibly enhanced from this, but also it can help us come up with things that we may not have even been able to imagine before. And then how do we actually build those things, like from a construction standpoint and a physical building standpoint? So I think there's a lot of ways that it's going to change our profession and open up new possibilities. And just to put, because I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, if we leverage artificial intelligence to do those things and to help us get to more meaningful work, maybe faster and better, then we have more time to focus on other things in our lives, and there could be a renewed renaissance where there's a renewed focus on the art and culture and music and all of those other things that as humans we love and enjoy so much. And if you think about it, the Renaissance came after an industrial revolution where technology, gave back productivity and enhanced the world so that we as humans could focus on that. So we have a work dilemma that we're going to have to deal with, but also a societal dilemma that we're going to have to deal with. And we have to think about how do we capitalize on that.
Very true.
I think that's a solid point. Again, we could talk for hours on this, but one of the things that I'm really fascinated about, and maybe we'll close here on this, right, is that you have design. Speaking from a pure design perspective, you have very localized design as you go across the globe, right? And this is influenced by X and Y and Z. As we've just gone through now, the democratization of access to technology through AI, etc., will we start to see the individual design patterns that are localized to certain areas and cultures, etc., shrink down into sort of a beige design where everyone gets what you get, and maybe go into that utilitarian sort of realm that you spoke of earlier? What are your thoughts on that, Kay, and just closing?
God, I hope not. I mean, that would be horrible. Look, I'm going to say this, and we say that we talk about this a lot. We actually believe that in the last several years, we have all kind of driven to try to drive for the average person doing the average thing. And quite frankly, one size misfits all. We've oversimplified what we do, and we've homogenized it into something that is just ugh. And I think what we really need to think about is, are we trying to make it easier for ourselves when we come up with all these corporate guidelines and standards and, just easily cranking things out, or are we trying to make it a better experience? And if we can spend more time on creating a better experience for individuals, being more sensitive to the cultural nuances and the flavor of the local culture, I think that's really, really beneficial. I will say, though, I'm a little concerned. I don't think it's really equal. I think there are certain parts of the world where, either because of lack of education or lack of infrastructure or lack of income, they don't have the same access to some of these things. And that the divide and the chasm between the haves and the have-nots, I think, is getting bigger and bigger. And siloed and separated societies have never really been very successful. And so I think that's one of the things we worry about. We also worry about putting tools in the hands of people who think they can do something, right? Like a 16-year-old can drive a Porsche. I would not give a 16-year-old a Porsche, okay? There's artificial intelligent tools that you can give somebody today so that they can design their own house. I wouldn't want to live in a house designed by, the accountant next door who designed it on his own. I'm not trying to be dismissive of that, but there are things that we have learned and skills that we know. It's kind of like the metaverse too. Like, if you think about it, the metaverse is a mess. It is all these people who are just throwing up all of this crazy stuff because they can design it themselves without any understanding of the fact that you are literally short-circuiting most of the people you're designing this for because they can't handle it. I know very few people that can go into the metaverse and don't just get either nauseous or sick or whatever, because you have people that don't know they don't understand the influence that how we design things has on individuals. And so they're designing things that just are outrageous and crazy, thinking it's great and cool, but you're really just short-circuiting everybody that it's meant to service. So, tools that expedite things in the right hands is great. Tools that expedite things in the wrong hand is scary. And so I think we just need to go into it with open eyes. And tools in the hands of people that will do nefarious things, we all got to keep an eye on that.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate this. We probably need to get you back on here, have a follow-up conversation. I know you're traveling, you've been traveling quite a bit, but this was fabulous, really mind-boggling, and very insightful. Thank you so much. We'll definitely.
Always happy to have the conversation and debate all of this great stuff. And thank you guys for inviting me. I did not know I was the first guest. I feel so honored. I'm so happy.
We are honored that you are our first guest. Thank you so much.
Maybe we threw down the gauntlet there for everybody else. So
we set the bar, and the bar is up here. That is for sure.
Okay.
For sure. Thank you so much. And speaking of that, guys, if you want to hear more from the podcast, you want to have more engaging conversations like Kay had with us right now, please subscribe, leave your comments below in the comment section. We will be back with episode 3 before you know it. And once again, Kay, thank you very, very much. This is not a one and done. You are coming back, that is for sure.
Always happy to do that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.